Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about what appears to be the very first Zelda project for Nintendo Switch 2. Two of the most prominent leakers in the Nintendo sphere seem to be speaking on this Zelda project, but not only are we hearing about the Zelda project, but its codename and also, and perhaps more importantly, the codename for Nintendo Switch 2. So what might this all suggest? That's what we're going to be talking more about today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So in yesterday's video, we actually spoke on this a little bit, because it could be an answer for what this other rumor regarding a Zelda project could be for. But in my opinion, based off what we heard from Papadinos a few days ago, what he's referring to is an entirely different project, which was the focus for yesterday's video, and that could be the Zelda release for this year. So if you're interested in that, it's yesterday's video. What we're focusing on here is this Zelda project that may very well be the first one for Switch 2. So basically, a few days prior, a lot of people were talking about how we may have discovered the code name for Nintendo Switch 2. And some people were thinking that it could be Muji. We saw as a part of this Nintendo SDK, this Muji name appearing a few times. But what some people found interesting is that Muji means some interesting things. In Nepal, it means pubic hair, but in Japan, it just means no brand quality goods, apparently. So, what could this name be for? Well, it's looking like this Muji name we were seeing was more so just a placeholder, based off what we're hearing from both Midori and Pyoro. So, Midori posted this on May 12th. Which was actually just yesterday. This is all happening so quick. But anyways, they here said, there is a project at Nintendo with the codename U-King-O. It might be related to the rumors of the next Nintendo console codename. So U-King-O, well, or at least the U-King part, this was the codename for Breath of the Wild, but now it has an O. And so they're saying it could be related to Nintendo's next console codename. Pyoro actually liked this tweet, according to Bard's Clouts, and yeah, that's true, you can just check his public likes. And Pyoro responded and said, I knew that codename, but never thought it could be related to Ounce, or something, to be honest. Midori has made a great point here. So what's even more interesting about this, we have Midori, who's considered to be a Pyoro level leaker, but focuses more so on Sega and Atlus, but occasionally brings some things up related to Nintendo. More recently been mentioning things about Switch 2, but then also we have Pyoro, who also more recently has been mentioning things about Switch 2, and is considered to be the most reliable Nintendo leaker of all time. Typically they only talk about things when they're going to be happening in short notice. This, however, appears to be a bit different. So of course, take it with a grain of salt, plans can change and all that, but this appears to be them speaking on what they're hearing behind the scenes, and they're talking about the codename. And what's interesting is that, unlike other prior Nintendo consoles, we haven't been given the confirmation of the codename for Switch 2. Nintendo may not even be giving us the codename for this console, not officially. So it's looking like it's getting leaked instead. And Pyoro is referring to it as Ounce, or something, to be honest. Ounce starts with O, which would make sense with U-King-O. So there's a history of Nintendo remasters having codenames, and there being an extra letter added to suggest that it's a remaster for that newer console. So if the Switch 2 codename is Ounce or something to that effect, then they could be adding an extra letter there to suggest it's some sort of enhanced version for that console. So if initially the original Breath of the Wild had the codename of U-King, and now there's this codename for U-King-O, it suggests that Nintendo is working on an enhanced version of Breath of the Wild for the successor console, what we've been calling Switch 2. Now we'll speak more on this enhancement of Breath of the Wild in a moment, but going back to this idea of the Switch 2 also having the codename for Ounce, maybe it's not actually Ounce, but actually OZ, Oz. OZ stands for Ounce, and I think this might be the case because Pyoro's saying Ounce or something, to be honest, so it's seeming like there's not a bunch of clarity there. So if you had saw OZ, which would stand for Ounce, it may just be OZ. Kind of like how Nintendo NX, that was a codename for Switch, it was just 2 letters. Maybe OZ is the short codename for Switch 2. This makes some sense to me. Now, when we think of something like Muji, which doesn't really stand for much, doesn't seem to suggest much about the Switch 2, it's not too exciting. And we think about ounce, that also doesn't seem to suggest much about Switch 2, it's not too exciting. An ounce? An ounce of what? Maybe they're going for something very small? I guess, but even an ounce, that seems like a little bit of an exaggeration, which could be what they're going for, just the project name hinting at some sort of aim they have for what they're doing. But Oz, O-Z, that carries a bit more weight in my opinion. That has more connotation. So if you've never heard of the movie The Wizard of Oz, it's about this supposed great powerful wizard. So speaking on Switch 2, and this codename of Switch Oz, that suggests some powerful magic. And what I find extra interesting about this is that I've been sort of joking around about DLSS, which stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling, this technology that we're expecting to see in Switch 2 since Nvidia is working so closely with Nintendo here. And basically this is a technology that uses AI to improve resolution, performance, ray reconstruction, and basically it's something that helps to do a lot of things to improve games and help hardware punch a lot higher than their weight. And so it's like magic. It magically improves games, is how I've referred to it, and many people seem to resonate with this, and it appears Nintendo seems to resonate with it as well, because the codename could be Switch Oz. And it could go beyond this. We've heard of the reports regarding a magnetic controller, so the new style of Joy-Con may connect magnetically to the Switch 2, which also may seem like magic here, so they could just be going for this evolution of the Nintendo Switch that just does a lot of really cool things that almost seem magical. And maybe that's the overall intent with the Switch 2 project, hence the codename Switch Oz, which to me sounds awesome. Now, does this give us any hint about the actual name for Switch 2? I'm gonna say probably not. It might, but it's going to be something that will be very hard to really sort out. Because let's remind ourselves, we've gotten the official codenames for prior consoles in the past for Nintendo, and it hasn't done a great job of leading us in the right direction for what the console will actually be called. We had Nintendo Revolution, which was for the Nintendo Wii, so that was quite a twist. It made sense because Revolution was about completely changing the game and starting something new, and that's definitely what the Wii was, but that was pretty hard to predict. For the Wii U is Project Cafe, and so that's definitely pretty hard to pick up on as well. And then the Nintendo NX was the Switch, so not easy to sort of extrapolate what the actual name will be based off the code name. But let's now go back to this idea of an enhancement of Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild is one of the best-selling games on Switch, and it makes sense to put out some sort of major Zelda entry early on in a console. We've seen Nintendo do this many a time. If it's not a new game, it's some type of remaster. And so here we have this project that Midori is speaking on that is Yu King O, seemingly suggesting that they are working on an enhanced version of Breath of the Wild for Switch 2. And this makes an interesting amount of sense because there was a tech demo we heard about from Gamescom last year, and it was Breath of the Wild running in 4K at 60 frames per second with next to no loading times. So for comparison, the original Breath of the Wild on Wii U ran at 720p. On Switch, it ran at 900p, and the frame rate would be 30, and sometimes would dip below depending on the circumstance. The implication of it being on Switch 2 running at now 4K is a vast improvement resolution-wise, and at 60 FPS, we assume rock solid 60 FPS, we shall see, is also a vast improvement, especially for an open world game that seems like something pretty impressive. And for it to also have next to no loading times, that's definitely going to improve the flow of gameplay significantly. Being able to fast travel around, being able to boot up the game, perhaps seeing greatly reduced pop-in, everything flowing in more naturally as you explore the world. Those would be some vast improvements for Breath of the Wild, and if Nintendo wants to turn this supposed tech demo for Switch 2 into an actual game, go for it. Some people are going to love that. But I also am going to tell you my opinion. My opinion is, that would just not be that interesting for me personally. Why? Because I already have Breath of the Wild on my Switch. And we're already hearing that the Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible. That seems like a fairly safe prediction. It's not like I won't have access to Breath of the Wild on my Switch 2. Now, of course, would it be nicer to play it at a higher resolution with an improved frame rate and reduced loading times? Yes. But after pouring in about 500 hours or so on Breath of the Wild on Switch all these years, I don't feel like buying the game again with those improvements for $70. When I play some PS4 games on PS5 and they have a little graphical enhancement, it's nice, but it doesn't completely change my gameplay experience. Not so much that I'm willing to buy the game again, and perhaps at an even higher price. Now I would assume that this would include all the DLC for Breath of the Wild, and that would be nice. And for those who have not played Breath of the Wild on Switch or Wii U, playing it on Switch 2 with all these improvements would be wonderful. And, you know, Nintendo could also potentially allow for cheap upgrades, right? So maybe if I already have Breath of the Wild, I can put it onto my Switch 2, and I'll have the option to purchase an upgrade without having to spend a full $70, maybe just 10 or 20 bucks. At that point, I would seriously consider it. But without any sort of significant new content to bring me back, some sort of remix of the campaign or a new extra campaign added on, I wouldn't really feel like this would be too compelling. And I would also find it somewhat odd with Tears of the Kingdom having just come out to get a Breath of the Wild remaster, I assume sometime next year early on. And so my take is this. I think this is something that could happen, but I also don't think it's necessarily going to be like a really big deal kind of release. And I'll go as far as to say that this would be a little bit of a mistake from the perspective of it being the sole big hype Zelda project to start off the generation. If this remaster of Breath of the Wild is Nintendo's answer for having something significant Zelda early on for a Switch 2, and there's no other sort of major Zelda projects in the foreseeable future for a few years, I think that would be a mistake. That's my opinion. I still think that this would sell pretty well, and there will be people that would enjoy it, but without some sort of additional content there, I just don't think it would be that big of a deal. Now, something that I think is worth noting is if this might impact, say for example, the theory on maybe an Ocarina of Time remake. So I've discussed the Ocarina of Time remake a few times already. I actually mentioned it recently in another Zelda video a couple days ago. I still think it could happen, but I also will concede that something like this would decrease the chances of it happening, and I would say it does push it back a little bit. I wouldn't expect to see an Ocarina of Time remake trailer or a teaser of it in the first Switch 2 trailer, for example, if they're going to have a Breath of the Wild remaster early on. This would be something that would take a bit longer. And maybe that would work out timing-wise, since we are also expecting a live-action Zelda movie, and maybe Nintendo's intending for this remake to happen closer to the release of the Zelda movie, and that could be divided by a couple years. I'm not even going to consider how long we'll have to wait for the next actual brand new Zelda game, because that could be another 6 years from now. So there are going to have to be multiple Zelda projects to hold us over until that point, and this Breath of the Wild remaster could be one of them. And if it has new content, or if it remixes the campaign in some way, maybe somehow they also include an enhancer for Tears of the Kingdom on top of that with some new content or a master mode of some kind, that would maybe have me buy in. And maybe the improvements go beyond just 4K and a better frame rate and better loading. Maybe they add in ray tracing, maybe they work on the textures a bit more. Maybe there are a number of quality of life updates to improve the overall flow of the game. If they do different things like this, along with some sort of new content or remix of the campaign, then maybe I would be more into this idea. But I'm more so thinking this will basically be 4K, 60, maybe ray tracing, better loading, and that's what it is. And hopefully they have some sort of small price we have to pay to get the upgrade, and for those who just don't have it, they buy it full price. And it's just something to kind of keep the momentum going for that game early on for Switch 2 and other games. It wouldn't just be for Breath of the Wild, but other big Switch games that Nintendo wants to stay relevant throughout the Switch 2 era. That's my take on the matter. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.